report on this computer. Hey, that was my one goal.
Got that done.
Got that done. So I think we're on chapter 15.
Then I missed
Is that-
last week, so I don't know where you're. It's where.
I have a little note saying 15. No one disagrees with me. Would anyone, it's like about 35 verses, so I bet we can do it all in one go. Would anyone like to read?
I can if you want me to.
Okay, thank you, Leslie.
I'm reading out of the NRSV. So, you want me to read the whole thing? Well,
I think so, unless you feel like you want to stop at some place.
yeah, okay,
See how it
Samuel
goes. If you want to stop, stop.
that's fine. I'll see if it comes to a stopping point. Sometimes they do. Samuel said to Saul, "The Lord sent me to anoint you king over his people, Israel. Now, therefore, listen to the words of the Lord. Thus says the Lord of hosts, I will punish the Amalekites for what they did in opposing the Israelites when they came up out of Egypt. Now go and attack Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have. Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey." So Saul summoned the people and numbered them in Telaim, 200,000 foot soldiers and 10,000 soldiers of Judah. Saul came to the city of the Amalekites and lay in wait in the valley. Saul said to the Kenites, "Go, leave, withdraw from among the Amalekites, or I will destroy you with them. For you showed kindness to all the people of Israel when they came up out of Egypt." So the Kenites withdrew from the Amalekites. Saul defeated the Amalekites from Havilah as far as Shur, which is east of Egypt. He took King Agag of the Amalekites alive, but utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. Saul and the people spared Agag and the best of the sheep and of the cattle and of the fatlings and the lambs and all that was valuable, and would not utterly destroy them. All that was despised and worthless they utterly destroyed. The word of the Lord came to Samuel. "I regret that I made Saul king, for he has turned back from following me and has not carried out my commands." Samuel was angry and he cried out to the Lord all night. Samuel rose early in the morning to meet Saul, and Samuel was told. Samuel went to Carmel, where he set up a monument for himself, and on returning, he passed on down to Gilgal. When Samuel came to Saul, Saul said to him, "May you be blessed by the Lord. I have carried out the command of the Lord." But Samuel said, "What then is this bleating of sheep in my ears and the lowing of cattle that I hear?" Saul said, "They have brought them from the Amalekites, for the people spared the best of the sheep and the cattle to sacrifice to the Lord your God. But the rest we have utterly destroyed." Then Samuel said to Saul, "Stop. I will tell you what the Lord said to me last night." He replied, "Speak." Samuel said, "Though you are little in your own eyes, are you not the head of the tribes of Israel? The Lord anointed you king over Israel, and the Lord sent you on a mission and said, 'Go, utterly destroy the sinners, the Amalekites, and fight against them until they are consumed.' Why then did you not obey the voice of the Lord? Why did you swoop down on the spoil and do what was evil in the sight of the Lord?" Saul said to Samuel, "I have obeyed the voice of the Lord. I have gone on the mission on which the Lord sent me. I have brought Agag, the king of Amalek, and I have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. But from the spoil, the people took sheep and cattle and best of the things devoted to destruction to sacrifice to the Lord your God in Gilgal." And Samuel said, Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offering and sacrifice as in obedience in the voice of the Lord? Surely to obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed that than the fat of rams. For rebellion is no less a sin than divination, and stubbornness is like iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being king. Saul said to Samuel, I have sinned, for I have transgressed the commandment of the Lord in your words, because I feared the people and obeyed their voice. Now, therefore, I pray, pardon my sin and return with me, so that I may worship the Lord. Samuel said to Saul, I will not return with you, for you have rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord has rejected you from being king over Israel. As Samuel turned to go away, Saul caught hold of the hem of his robe, and it tore. And Samuel said to him, the Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you this very day, and has given it to a neighbor of yours who is better than you. Moreover, the glory of Israel will not recant or change his mind, for he's not immortal that he should change his mind. Then Saul said, I have sinned. Yet honor me now before the elders of my people and before Israel, and return with me so that I may worship the Lord your God. So Samuel turned back after Saul, and Saul worshipped the Lord. Then Samuel said, bring Agag, king of the Amalekites, here to me. And Agag came to him haltingly. Agag said, surely this is the bitterness of death. But Samuel said, as your sword has made women childless, so your mother shall be childless among women. And Samuel hewed Agag in pieces before the Lord in Gilgal. Then Samuel went to Ramah, and Saul went up to his house in Gibeah of Saul. Samuel did not see Saul again until the day of his death. But Samuel grieved over Saul, and the Lord was sorry that he had made Saul king over Israel.
Wow. Thank you, Leslie. That was beautifully read.
Thank you.
So I sort of feel sorry for Saul. I feel like he's trying,
Fine, he just doesn't make it.
and there's not a lot of leeway for him.
I have
That's
some
great.
problems. I have some
Yeah.
problems with this
Yeah.
passage.
Go. Let's hear it, David.
Well, I have problems right from the very beginning that
Drawing
that
everything.
God commands them to kill basically every living thing that that isn't vegetation or that isn't a plant. Every living creature they're supposed to put to the ban. They're just supposed to kill everything. And wow, that's it's hard for me to believe that all the Amalekites were responsible for the actions of King Agag. That's just a start. There are lots of things going on with this, and in a sense, Saul's being punished for being merciful. Although that's not the actual reason he necessarily does it, but they do it for the booty, the loot. They
Right.
use it. And he comes up with this excuse. First, he says it's for sacrifice, and that Samuel won't let that fly. Obedience is better than sacrifice. And then he kind of blames the people. He says it's the people. They're the ones that they wanted to do this, and it's not my fault. And then they start talking about the fact that, well, though that's just the first line of issues. There's just a lot of things going on here that are really difficult to understand from where we are today. I just that whole view of God as for people who are disobedient, and then to just slay them all, man, woman, and child. And then Samuel, the prophet of God, hacks Agag in pieces. It's just a really yeah. Sometimes you wonder. Well, I don't. I believe that what's going on here is people are justifying their view of the way their enemies are supposed to be dealt with. In that particular world, very often whole people groups are put to what they call the ban. And that just means when you defeat them, they're just all killed. And yeah, this is kind of what's going on. I'm kind of wondering, wow, I don't know how far to go with this, but I have a hard time with God telling him to kill every living thing. I have a feeling that this is some justification on their part, some reason they're giving that God separated himself from Saul. And so it's just I don't know, maybe some of you can, the rest of you can respond, because I don't have a good answer for this. It's very confusing to me. This is something I've dealt with for a long time, the whole concept of God being just unloving. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're just so firmly in the Old Testament right now.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, specifically, like in legal textual analysis, you look at the things people include specifically, and then you can extrapolate. But infants is in here. He names that man, woman, child, and infant, that we're going to kill all of it.
All of it, yeah.
And then the sheep didn't hurt anybody either. So I
The
think it's
camels and
just
donkeys.
the camels and the donkeys. It's just really difficult from a modern perspective to be okay with someone being on the outs with God because they didn't kill every baby. That's hard. I do have a footnote, not that it helps me any, but it says that this grievance upon the Amalekites was an ancient grievance, and that the Lord swore to blot out their memory in a passage in Exodus, and Moses had vowed continual war with them. So I don't think it being an old grievance makes it easier to understand the approach here.
I just can't accept what this has to say about God. I can't, I'll be honest with you. I'll just be straightforward. I can't worship the kind of a God that would call me to do something like this. I think this is a misunderstanding. I don't think they understood what was truly going on here. I think this is what they believed God to be like, because that's what gods were like in their world. I don't really believe that God was. I think the Bible at times doesn't just tell us, when it uses Israel or the Hebrew people as an example, sometimes it uses them as a negative example. And I think this is the understanding they have of God. But God, through the passage of time, begins to express himself in different ways and tries to over and over again, tries to show them this is not really what he was like. I guess rejecting Saul because his concept was he wanted these things for booty. He wanted this. He wanted the best of everything, and he says it's a sacrifice. Well, I'm not sure they were going to sacrifice everyone. I think that was just an excuse. But I think this is, as you say, we're deep in the Old Testament. This is the understanding they had at the time. I think we've come to understand God differently and better through the New Testament and through Jesus. The example he gives us of what God is truly like. But I think these people at that time really had this understanding that in order to please their God, the things they needed to do is they needed to utterly destroy their enemies. They needed to have blood sacrifices. But in this passage, it says, well, what's better, sacrifices or obedience? And so that even calls that into question a little bit. Another question I have to throw in here, Samuel says something here about God won't change his mind. God can't change his mind,
And yet,
but God does change his mind in other places. Right now he won't, but God does change his mind. God changed his mind after the flood. God, changed his mind when he was going to destroy the Hebrews when Moses came down off the mountain and they had the golden calf. God often, well, I shouldn't say often, but frequently enough that it says that God repented of this or God repented of that. So yeah.
I would
So,
even say right here, when he says he regrets having Saul as king, that's
Yeah,
him
yeah.
saying that might be him changing his mind. I
Mm.
feel like they say God doesn't change his mind, and oh gosh, I wish I'd never done that. I've changed my mind on Saul. Say it in the same chapter here. So,
That's, yeah.
um,
I
yes,
guess what I'm getting at, yeah,
it's
like
a
what you're
mess.
saying is, yeah, we're just deep in the Old Testament. It's hard for us to understand entirely what's going on here and understand. I think we need to be very careful when we take these Old Testament understandings of God and try to apply them to where we are now. I just don't think they're valid anymore. I think they're showing a completely different world with a completely different view of God and the way, the way he was.
And I would think, what other people see if people agree with me, but I would say in the New Testament, there's several places where Jesus goes out of his way to say just because these people are a neighboring tribe or they're your enemies doesn't mean that God doesn't love them. He has lots of stories about Samaritans,
Mhm.
the woman at the well, the good Samaritan
Mhm.
helping on the road. So I feel like this view was fairly rejected in the New Testament.
It was even rejected in places in the Old Testament. If you think about Jonah and the people of Nineveh, God went to send Jonah to say they were going to be destroyed, and Jonah didn't want to do it, and then he did it. And then when he did it, the people repented, and God decided he wasn't going to destroy them. And Jonah said, "That's why I didn't want to go, because I knew you'd do this. You wouldn't destroy them."
I actually love that part after this. I always knew the story where he's in the whale, right?
Mhm.
But then after where he's pouting outside the city, do you know this part?
Yep.
He's pouting because God saved everyone. And he's like, I
Mhm.
just wish I was dead. And he's just like, you can see him stamping his foot. And so then God gives him, I might be remembering it wrong, but I think God like grows a plant so he's in the shade. And he's
Yes.
like, okay, well, this isn't too bad. And then God takes the plant away. He's like, why did you do that? And he's like, well, I can give you whatever I want. And I can save
Yeah,
whoever I want.
he's mourning this plant dying, and yet he wants a whole huge city to be destroyed by God.
Mhm.
Right. And I just love that little, it's so humanizing. Just pouting out in the desert, and then you're mad your plant's gone. I wish they included that part in the children's books. 'cause
Right,
it's
yeah,
so
we don't.
fun. But yes, so I don't know. And I do think Saul's he didn't ask for this role. He doesn't seem completely disobedient. He's not doing the opposite of what God asks. He's just not doing it perfectly here.
He just doesn't get it.
Just doesn't.
Yeah.
And I don't get it either. So I guess
We're all on the same boat.
I agree, and we're reading into it. We may be giving Saul a little more credit. It might not be his mercifulness or his what really the idea that he wants to sacrifice so much as he just wants to keep the best of everything.
right.
And also he didn't want to kill Agag. He was willing to kill the rest, but he wanted to kind of have him as a trophy to show that he had beaten the Amalekites. And they frequently, they'd march the defeated king and before the people, and it would really embellish his, really make his reputation stronger to have this captured king. So I'm not sure Samuel or Saul's motives were pure, but still, the whole concept to begin with that, is you're supposed to put every living thing to the sword. Wow, that's inexplicable to us. And I think it should be inexplicable because we're on the other side of Jesus and the grace and the mercy that he showed us, that God was about. That God, rather than taking power, rather than punishing the enemies, Jesus instead was willing to die. And as he was dying, said, Father, forgive them. This is quite a different view of God than the one that's presented right here.
Yeah, I would say opposite in a lot of ways. Well, whatever the reasoning, it's inexplicable to me as it may be. I think it's clear that we're gonna get rid of Saul. He's
Yeah.
being, however they're writing this story, he's
But it
not gonna
takes-
come out ahead. Go ahead, what did you say, Leslie?
I think it takes a little while though.
Yeah,
If you, when we read forward, going forward, because I mean, I read this before and many of you probably have, but it will take a while because David and Saul have some issues with each other. So,
should
Yeah,
we,
and even,
should we keep going and read a little bit about David? Or go ahead, David, what were you gonna, you're both
I was
Davids.
just saying, even before this, God had already said he wasn't going to retain Saul as king because of the fact that he had made the sacrifice. So this is just a constant repetition, maybe even from different sources, kind of just jammed together to show, just really build a very strong case of the fact that God was done with Saul, and to justify supplanting Saul with David.
Shall we take 16? I can read if, unless someone else has a burning desire.
fine.
No? Okay. So I'm reading from the NRSV. My section says, David anointed as king. The Lord said to Samuel, how long will you grieve over Saul? I have rejected him from being king over Israel. Fill your horn with oil and set out. I will send you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I've provided for myself a king among his sons. Samuel said, how can I go? If Saul hears of it, he will kill me. And the Lord said, take a heifer with you and say, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what you shall do. And you shall anoint for me the one whom I name to you. Samuel did what the Lord commanded and came to Bethlehem. The elders of the city came to meet him trembling and said, do you come peaceably? He said, peaceably, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Sanctify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice. And he sanctified Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. When they came, he looked on Eliab and thought, surely the Lord's anointed is now before the Lord. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord does not see as mortals see. They look on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. Then Jesse called Abinadab and made him pass before Samuel. And he said, neither has the Lord chosen this one. Then Jesse made Shammah pass by, and he said, neither has the Lord chosen this one. Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, and Samuel said to Jesse, the Lord has not chosen any of these. Samuel said to Jesse, are all your sons here? And he said, there remains yet the youngest, but he's keeping the sheep. And Samuel said to Jesse, send and bring him, for we will not sit down until he comes here. He sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy and had beautiful eyes and was handsome. The Lord said, rise and anoint him, for this is the one. Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon David from that day forward. Samuel then set out and went to Ramah. Now the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord tormented him. And Saul's servants said to him, see now, an evil spirit from God is tormenting you. Let our Lord now command the servants who attend you to look for someone who is skillful in playing the lyre. And when the evil spirit from God is upon you, he will play it, and you will feel better. So Saul said to his servants, provide for me someone who can play well, and bring him to me. One of the young men answered, I have seen a son of Jesse the Bethlehemite who is skillful in playing, a man of valor, a warrior, prudent in speech, and a man of good presence, and the Lord is with him. So Saul sent messengers to Jesse and said, "Send me your son David, who is with the sheep." Jesse took a donkey loaded with bread, a skin of wine, and a kid, and sent them by his son David to Saul. And David came to Saul and entered his service. Saul loved him greatly, and he became his armor bearer. Saul sent to Jesse, saying, "Let David remain in my service, for he has found favor in my sight." And whenever the evil spirit from God came upon Saul, David took the lyre and played it with his hand, and Saul would be relieved and feel better, and the evil spirit would depart from him. That's a lot going on. So first we have Saul's out searching for a new king. The Lord says, go find somebody else. And then they have this sort of like a beauty pageant where they have to parade each son out in front. It's like the evening gown competition. And they end up waiting, almost like a Cinderella scene in my mind, where they're like, don't you have anyone else in this house that can try on the shoe? And they have to send for the littlest one. And then a big scene change. And now we're seeing a very tormented Saul. And who ends up making him feel better? But this little guy, David. What do people think? I kind of like this part where it talks about the Lord doesn't look at people's appearance, and we shouldn't pick based on that. Yeah, even though we're not picking based on appearance, they go out of their way to tell us how beautiful and ruddy and handsome little David
It
is.
is, yeah.
Well, the interesting thing here was that he was, David was anointed king, but he doesn't actually become king yet.
Mhm.
Saul is still king, and it's just interesting that it takes a while for him to become king. But it just always confused me here a little bit, because he becomes king, he gets anointed, and his family saw him being anointed. I don't know if any of the people in the town were there too, but saw him being anointed, but then he's not king yet. I mean, he doesn't go, he ends up being Saul. And I don't know if this is, sometimes I wonder if the time frame on this, that David, it might have been a different time when David was pulled in to be the lyre, to play the lyre for Saul, or what. I always just wondered if some of this is not written in order, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, because later on we're going to get the whole Goliath story.
Mhm.
And the Goliath story, Saul doesn't recognize David. He doesn't know who he is. And yet, according to the chronology here, he'd been playing the lyre for him and been made his armor bearer and the whole thing. And this is really fanboy fiction for David. It's,
Well,
the whole thing about the way he looks, and then it talks about how, what he's like, that he was a mighty man, a man of valor, a warrior, prudence. This kid's, it's just a kid, so it almost seems like they're inserting some things that came from. So I think you're right, like Leslie, the chronology, the actual time chronology is very confused here. I think there are various stories and various sources being weaved into a web, but it doesn't follow a history in terms of being, just chronologically very logical.
Mary wanted to say something.
yeah, well, the other thing I think that goes along with that is Samuel didn't want to go because he thought Saul would kill him if he knew he was going to look for another king. Yet he brings David back and Saul accepts him. So again, that goes along with, it's not chronologically in order. It can't be.
Right.
Because why would Saul accept David if he knows he's been anointed to be his replacement?
Right. Yeah. It's almost like it's like multiverse. Like there's two stories about, hey, where did this kid come from?
Uh-huh,
And they're like, oh, well, Samuel anointed him when he was little. And oh no, he was the armor bearer and he was like in the court for
Right.
Saul. It's like they just put both of them in there.
and I don't have it with me, but I have a Bible at home that's written in chronological order. And I'll have to look and see what it says in this particular area.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then this Goliath story could be another, where did this kid come from?
Right,
Like-
because Saul doesn't recognize him there, but yet he's been with him all this time.
Yeah. It's almost like people all had different stories
Uh-huh.
about David's like origin story. And they kind of all got.
And again, that
together.
could be, different people's interpretations or knowledge of what was going on too, of how this ended up being written this way.
I think that's absolutely true, and it's common practice in the Bible that when people have different and even conflicting stories, they don't tend to try to harmonize them. They just put them in together, and then you can kind of work it through. Because I don't think the Bible's intent is ever to be historically accurate, necessarily chronological. It's to tell a story about, God and his relationship with his people. And a lot of these details are not, this comes from oral traditions, and these details are not, they're not important. And in oral traditions, a lot of these details aren't even possible to keep as it goes, down through generations. Errors are going to creep in, things like that. But the important thing is the story about God's relationship with his people. And especially here, I think in Samuel, it's really setting up the stage for David to be the king, the one that God always intended, even though God pointed Samuel to Saul. He's the one, God's the one that chose Saul as well. And well, maybe God doesn't change his mind, but then why did he choose Saul? Why did he choose such a defective candidate there? So, and as we look forward, although this is kind of a eulogy for David, David didn't always perform so well either. Yeah, he had some rather big problems himself. Yeah.
It seems like David really was quite a gifted person. He had lots of positive things in his life at this point. He played the lyre. He could, and music. That's one of the things I realized, that people who have emotional and David's worked with Alzheimer's patients, people, that music is really something that really gets them, and they actually remember music more than they remember a story. It's just, for some reason, music is a big deal with people who have emotional or issues. I thought that was kind of neat, because that shows where God does use music, and and music is so important in our lives.
Yeah,
One other
absolutely.
thing. Go ahead. No.
I was
ahead.
just agreeing with her that
Okay.
music is important and useful. That's all.
Yeah, it does speak at a different level. Verse 14 says something interesting too. I just, in passing, the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul,
Mm,
and an evil spirit from the Lord tormented him.
from the Lord.
Yes, an evil spirit from the Lord. In
Yeah.
Greek, excuse me, in Hebrew, the word means bad, a bad spirit. So,
Also sent from the Lord. So
yes.
this version of God is really
Up and down.
up and down and
Mm-hmm.
not how we, or maybe I should just say I conceive of God in my own life.
I think as you look at the Old Testament, you
Mhm.
see an evolving understanding of God. As he interacts with his people, you see them begin to understand him better as he reveals himself time and time again, usually differently than they really envision God. They have a culture around them that looks at God as in certain ways, and they believe God must be certain things. They live in a world where the deities were capricious and jealous, and they were kind of men writ large in their emotions. And this whole story through the Old Testament and through the intertestamental period and until it reaches its epitome in Jesus, is an evolving understanding, God trying to break through, God trying to get people to understand what he's really like, and people just not quite getting it.
But even today, you'll have people say, how could a loving God do this to
Yeah.
someone? Or make this happen, or, some of the natural disasters and all that. How could a loving God do that to these people? And so we still put the bad on God as well as the good on God in many of us in our minds. And
It's
maybe
really good
that's
to know.
kind of what's going on here too. It's people's thought processes.
Yeah.
And it's verbally passed down. It's not written, so it gets all kinds of other things interjected into the original message.
I think
Yes.
you're right, Marion. I think the fact that their understanding was evolving, and as you really imply is that our understanding of God is evolving too. We haven't achieved full understanding of God, any of us, but good parts of our culture still have really destructive views of the way God is. And even though, it evolved and it was shown in Jesus, we still, 2,000 years later, we still don't get God completely right. It's a matter we're still understanding, and at least on a personal level, we need to come to a greater understanding of God, and it evolves as we look at those stories and see how these people worked it through, and as God has revealed himself.
Hi, Carol. I just wanted to welcome you.
She's muted, we can't hear.
I know, it's okay.
Hello,
Hi.
sorry
Hi.
I'm late. Our
Okay.
furnace wasn't working right and the plumber is here right now working on it, so,
Oh, no.
No,
oh well. Better now than in the middle of winter when it's below 0.
Yes,
Exactly.
amen.
Right.
So I was supposed to tell everyone at the beginning, but I came in late, so I didn't, is that we won't have Bible study next week
I didn't think we would.
because
Yeah.
Greg's out of town and I'm hoping to also be out of town. And I think everyone's got plans, so,
Supposed to be out of town.
so we will not have it the Wednesday before Thanksgiving and then re-meet again the Wednesday after. So,
Which is an Advent.
yes, no. It's hard to believe Advent's already upon us.
I know, I'm not ready.
No, I'm not. It's
There's
November.
screens in the trunk of my car though.
November seemed to slip out, the second half kind of going fast, but I think we
Charity,
probably, yes, go ahead, Leslie.
are the kids doing a program for
Yes,
Christmas?
yep, we'll have the Christmas pageant like always. I think it's the Sunday before.
Yeah, the greening is the 4th of December.
Is it really that fast?
Yeah, because I
Yeah.
wanted to know because I asked Barb Sunday and she said, yeah, they were gonna green really early this year
I'm gonna stop our
on the 4th of
recording.
December.